Alright, so I played a game recently called Grim Dawn. So it finally clicked. I finally understood what people were talking about all those years ago when they praised Diablo. Because I finally got the game which does that. But it does that so much better than anything I've seen before. All of this to say that I recommend the game glowingly. The best RPG of its kind I have ever played. What is it about? Honestly, who cares? I finished the game over 4 times now and I really can't recall much of anything being said. Very similar to Warframe. Stuff is going wrong, people are on the brink of extinction, brave hero with a shady past is going to save everyone down, have fun killing stuff. Not like any motivations for that. What did I like? For one, and this is a fairly big one for me, but probably irrelevant to others, I really enjoyed what this is for all intents and purposes a Titan Quest mod. A full game of course, but the engine is the same, which means that it is not demanding in the slightest. Titan Quest, a game that was released a while ago, even if it just feels like yesterday for me. I even remember a TV show talking about this fun new release. Anyway, it runs well, and that's something I always have to praise. There are a lot of games nowadays which look like ass, don't get optimized in the slightest, and take half an hour to load, only for the gameplay to be just as outdated as the first game of whatever crappy franchise it was spawned from. Totally not talking about Ubisoft here, no. And the thing is, I really enjoy how Grim Dawn looks. I think the demon-related areas are a little bit flimsy and the enemies there look a little wax-like, but aside from that, everything is pretty nice. Especially with stuff like my Shaman's Lightning. I am sure that's the reason why I enjoyed that particular mastery so much. Surely it looks dated, but the compromise between the demanding graphics and the outrageous fast-paced action is struck in a flawless way here. It loads fast and runs like a charm. Another thing, which is again personal, is the gamepad support. Now, one thing I always despised about these games is clicking. You want to go anywhere, you click. You want to attack, you click. You want to cast any spell, click. Inventory clicks. Map, click. What about WASD? Arrow keys at least. My right hand gets freaking tired after playing this. StarCraft doesn't get this much goddamn clicking. Enter the gamepad. Smooth movement with one stick, rotate camera with another, spells cast instantly on the button press. No need to have some dingy aim with a horrible console-style garbage. Customize the keys if necessary and then use the mouse for any kind of inventory or UI management. Absolutely genius, completely obvious, yet for some reason entirely ignored in other games. These games were born for a gamepad. Although I do admit that hitting things precisely is a bit difficult. But this is so fast-paced with so many enemies dying in seconds that precision is like it's like trying to swat flies with a hammer. You can always do that, but might be a bit of an overkill. So the actual important objective part I enjoy is the customization. That is something I'll praise heavily and note that it's deep, flexible and more interesting than any RPG I've ever played. More rambling on that later. There's quite an anime variety, a handful of secrets in every area, and some Metroidvania style of blocked off paths which get opened up later. I actually enjoyed exploring because of it. Something I absolutely disliked in Titan Quest, at least later arcs, where the areas can be enormous, have next to nothing hidden, and are swarmed with fast, really annoying enemies. It's also fairly convenient how a player can put a portal anywhere, and if they die, they can respawn in town and just teleport to a portal. While usually it's either a long run back, finite consumables for set portals, or a checkpoint system. In multiplayer it's also possible to use other people's portals, speedrunning through the game, if you so choose. There are also some minor story choices. It's extremely minor, like 4 or 5 quests total where the choices actually had an effect. But they are still there. Characters dying, factions turning hostile, dramatic story points, it's still something to praise. And that's about it for praise. But there are also certain points which, while not negatives, aren't positives either. So, first of all, the stats. There is physique, spirit, and cunning. These are attributes. I found that cunning is useless if you aren't playing a purely physical damage character. Which might sound good on paper, it makes sense, not like you're gonna get intelligence for a physical guy or vice versa, so an exclusive stat makes sense. But the thing is that the game offers so much more variety when it comes to magic. Besides, physical damage is somewhat bad early on. Not really having abilities, reliant on auto-attack procs and having no use for vast majority of stats. So what about spirit then? Almost every damage type, elemental, vitality, ether, chaos and poison, all of them get bonus from spirit. And boy does the game reward spellblade kind of gameplay. Not many games can balance that well, always making it clunky and either not magical or not physical. Here there's plenty of spells, melee combat and ranged options, all together in the same mastery tree. Got my nose. If you like me randomly decide, hey, rogue sounds interesting, only a dual wield class after all, it should be pretty high DPS, right? You'll be dead wrong, as the tree starts off with a bunch of cold vitality and even some ether damage, with only a bit of piercing coming later on, which is the physical thing I was going for. And that's only levels 10+. It's not that late, of course, early on, but you start the game and for the first time you're welcomed with, well, you can auto-attack, have fun, asshole. For the first few hours, boy, is that going to suck. And speaking of itemization, the depth of it is fairly complex, at least early on, without a best in slot item for every mastery. Problem is, it's impossible to know what is actually good without reading up for a while. I see a new drop, has a large percentage of physical damage on the weapon, some attack speed and overall nifty stats. My current weapon is meanwhile offering different stats and it's a few levels behind. How do I even know it's good? Reading. Read every spell, every passive, every proc, every devotion. It took me forever to realize what bleeding is actually not doing much for my lightning shaman, despite being in like half the talents. Simply because it doesn't scale. Items rarely have both bleed and lightning boosts, and some also have electrocute damage. What's the difference? What about elemental? Read up on that as well. It becomes difficult and overwhelming. And again, if you pick a spec which is a total dud early, then get items which are bad for it, but you don't know it, then it's gonna be a horrible experience. I hit 20 with a rogue and I was playing with an Oathkeeper who used the shield. He one-shot enemies whom I took like 5 or more hits to kill. It's not obvious at first glance which specs are great fast and which are crap like Nightblade. I just really dislike Nightblade, I'm making this obvious, and I picked Inquisitor as a second spec. Early on, no synergy whatsoever. And that's early. Problem is there is also late game, which I count as playing Ultimate. That's basically unlimited enemy level scaling and starts at a much higher level right from the get-go. I didn't get to 100 yet, but at least I got past 96 right now. So the thing about Ultimate is what it cuts player resistances. That I can deal with. However, I believe that the game also scales the enemies in level. I mean, yeah, it does, but it does it a bit too fast. So I've got a Death Knight, a ton of points in physique, so health, a bunch of things to keep myself alive, like procs which give health if I get brought to 0. And to top it all off, I got a bunch of potions which provide resistance to everything and give bonus health. Ether, poison, chaos, whatever, at 80%. Armor of course is high too, because of high physique items. So, why the hell do I die in about half a second to the totem mobs? Get good is obviously gonna be said, but I am just confused as to how I can clear out entire areas, take on multiple heroic units and regional bosses or act bosses, kill the super boss of a secret path without breaking a sweat, but die to some random bullshit that stuns me every few seconds, bursts me down in a second, and have 0 ways to avoid without just running non-stop, even then, it's pure luck. This as a melee tank. Holy hell, there is some BS when it comes to monster damage output. Extremely unstable and unbalanced. It feels like complete gambling whether one totem spawn is gonna kill me or barely tickle me. And absolutely nothing in between. Also, there is definitely some disparity when it comes to pacing. Early on is great. You've got your prison town, a bunch of rifts up north with notable enemies, tiny quests, small secrets, but all of it is secondary. As there is a clear path where you gotta go. Just go north and go to a warden cell in the village. And then, if you got scrap and cash, you can rebuild the bridge, and at any moment can check out the other side of the world with a lot of the same kind of pacing up to a bandit chief. Problem is, what after the bandit chief, zones get significantly bigger, with fewer rifts, things to find, fewer quests and secrets, and more annoying enemies. Pathways also go through the dungeons, get more confusing and long-winded. Dungeons also get bigger and longer, all looking similar within the same areas. The worst offender is probably Malmove, although Forgotten Gods and Act 4 got some pretty huge and fairly empty areas outside as well. But Malmove, oh boy, that one made me almost want to quit. The game forces the player into a place where everything is black. There are no markers on the map, and the enemies do the aforementioned 1-second KO. Oh, and the teleport is disabled. Yeah, that is not how you make things fun. It's supposed to be hell, basically. But you don't have to make the player go through hell as well. You aren't making Shadowlands here, don't pretend to be Blizzard. Anyway, That's my rambling about good and the bad of Grim Dawn. It's still the best ARPG I've ever played, and it made me curious about the genre when all the previous countless attempts to get into it have failed. Get it, it's fairly cheap, and there was even a fairly recent update. But I got more of a ramble on the RPGs as a whole. So I realized something. WoW sucks from an RPG perspective. And I think I never understood the appeal of Diablo-style games for the same reason. RPG can be done one of two ways, or both at the same time to the detriment of both to a degree. You can also split hairs and say that JRPGs are their own genre, that games like Assassin's Creed is its own thing and whatnot, but my particular point here splits them all by the development focus, and I only count two for this particular purpose. First is the story-focused kind, CRPGs for example. Not that they don't have gameplay, of course, but this is not the meat. Divinity Original Sin 2 is the one I adore and played hundreds of hours of. The player can do a myriad of different things to play a different role, from a story perspective. They can customize the character, adding more strength or dex or whatever, but it's not that interesting. Although Metamorph is definitely cool and should be in more games. Story is the main appeal though. You can be a bloodthirsty monster who eats people, destroys entire settlements and stabs everyone in the back at the first chance. Or, in the exact same scenario, you can try to avoid bloodshed as much as possible. Sneak around and refuse to consume sword if it means harming a living being. Second type is the Diablo style of games. Also my nose is got so horrible. So second is Diablo, action RPGs, but I always felt it wasn't very descriptive. And that is a genre with story being pushed to the sidelines. It's there, but well, it's about the gameplay. The player doesn't really get much flexibility as to how they act story-wise. And there's a myriad of different ways the character can be customized. However, I never saw it in Diablo. I felt like there was so little one could try and do. And there was basically a choice between base stats and that's it. So in Grim Dawn it was different for me. Example is I am playing a shaman. However, what kind of shaman? Because you can be focused on pets, you can be a ranged character, you can be a spellcaster, you can be a brutalizer melee with bleeds and physical damage. Or my build is a focus on lightning and fake pets. The totems and the little Whirly Storm follow me around. It's a strong melee combat, durability and bursty damage, and that's just my shaman. Every spec, every mastery can be customized and changed to fit the player to fit what they want. Occultist, whatever. The evil demon guy seems like a feeble spellcaster. However, there are a handful of talents which leech life, empower weapon damage, and provide more tools to survive the battle ahead. Every single tree offers options, and it's not just hard or put 2 out of 3 talent points into flurry because otherwise the next tier of talents doesn't unlock and the other talents provide less DPS. That is what WoW always was for me. I loved how complex rotations can get while trying to juggle other mechanics. How every item can offer different boosts to DPS despite being the same level or even lower level. But it was also basic when you compare it to the sheer flexibility of a full-fledged RPG like Grim Dawn. You don't just get haste and mastery as a melee shaman, and that's it. In WoW, the spec decides everything. The rest of the choices are almost cosmetic. The Grim Dawn offers so much more than that, even if, in the end, I do tend to go for electrical damage and everything else is secondary. It's still a hell of a lot more deep and complex than eye level equals good going on right now. Post-Cataclysm, every RPG aspect got dumbed down significantly. Imagine if Warlock suddenly decided to flex on people, put on mail armor and decided to start punching people with a bunch of pets, and then change talent tree to be a dot throw and debuffing gunslinger. How much cooler would it be if Destruction Warlock, Destruction, Affliction and Demonology spamming haste and intellect wasn't the only thing you can do. Can't remember if they even split and spell power or put them together again, whatever. Grim Dawn meanwhile offers everything. So much customization, so much variety, all for the role the player decides to play. This is the strength of these games, which I only now discovered, and honestly it almost completely turns me off of customization in other RPGs. For it's so bloody basic, I'd rather play the games which have compelling story instead of these story on rails games with the character customization depth of an NES RPG.